Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. Today is Sunday, June 21st, 2020, and we have an excellent discussion coming up regarding how one can grow the transhumanist movement. We have a variety of perspectives here for our conversation. So let us introduce our participants. And I will say to the participants in the live stream, please make sure you mute your connection if you're not the one who's speaking right now. So click on that mute button. We're still hearing some feedback, but yes, excellent. So I'll introduce our participants. We have a number of our US Transhumanist Party officers here. I'm Gennady Stoliarov II, the chairman of the US Transhumanist Party. We have David Shoemaker, our director of applied innovation. We have Pavel Ilin, our secretary. We have Charlie Kam, who is our 2020 US presidential nominee and director of marketing. We have Art Ramon Garcia, who is our director of visual art, Daniel Yeloashvili, our director of longevity outreach, and John Karatz, our director of energy issues. So today we'll be speaking with four of our guests who hail from numerous different countries and will be able to give us a global perspective on the state of the transhumanist movement and how to grow it. We have Malak Trabelsi Loeb from Dubai. She is an expert in international space law and international business law. We have Aria Cheng, our foreign ambassador in Canada, also the founder of the Transhumanist Party of Canada. We have Pam Keefe, who is our foreign ambassador to Hong Kong. She's also lived in Singapore. She's currently in the United States. We have Denisa Rensen, who is our foreign ambassador in Japan, and she also resides in Mexico some of the time. So truly a global panel today. And this is important because transhumanism is a global movement. It touches on issues and aspirations that will affect all of humanity. And it's really important to emphasize this. The ambitions of transhumanism are to make life better for everybody through the pursuit of emerging technologies, including advances in longevity, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, automation, vertical farming, alternative energy sources, space colonization. All of these are pursuits that could lead to the kind of bright future that we can see even in some of the backgrounds that our guests are utilizing today. So a space-faring, hyper-technological, multi-planetary civilization where all human beings have access to an extremely high standard of living by our baseline of comparison, so to speak. So transhumanism is a philosophy and it's a movement that seeks to use science and technology to dramatically improve the human condition, overcome the limitations that have plagued us since the dawn of human history. Death and disease are the most salient limitations that transhumanism seeks to overcome. But there are other limitations dealing with the impositions of the natural world upon human beings that transhumanists seek to transcend. And there's also a lot of diversity in the transhumanist movement, a diversity of backgrounds, as well as a diversity of what transhumanists choose to focus on. So I would say in a broader sense, anybody who uses technology to overcome the limits of the primordial human condition is a transhumanist. So if you wear eyeglasses to help you see more clearly, if you wear clothing to protect yourself from the elements, if you use motorized transportation, you are incorporating aspects of transhumanism into your life because you are able to do things with those technologies that you would not be able to do in their absence. So the first area that I would like our guests to delve into is that of awareness and reception of transhumanism abroad. And I would like to hear some perspectives about the extent to which transhumanism is explicitly recognized in the countries where you've spent a lot of time, as well as the extent to which people could be considered implicit transhumanists. So they might not use the term necessarily, but they're sympathetic to the general project of improving the human condition through science and technology. But also, if you perceive any areas where there is a lack of understanding or misunderstanding or misperception of what transhumanism means, feel free to address those as well. So let us start with Pam. What are your thoughts on the awareness and reception of transhumanism in the countries where you've resided? Let's see. Pam, I believe you're muted, so if you could unmute yourself.
Before I start, can I check,
Pam,
is there
I
an
believe
echo?
you're muted, so. Yes, you should pause the video stream on your end. So click pause on YouTube. You're muted, so. Yes, you should pause the video stream on your end. Yes, I'm hearing my own echo. You're muted, so. Yes, you should pause the video. So Pam, let's, while you work that out, could you mute yourself and we can go to Denisa instead. But Pam, just click the pause button or close YouTube on your end, and then we won't hear the echo. But Denisa, what are your thoughts on awareness and reception of transhumanism abroad? And
Okay.
Denisa, yes.
Okay, I'm muted now. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for
We can
having
hear
me.
you.
Great. Okay. Abroad, I've spent the last 2 years of my life traveling around Europe and Asia, and now I'm here at the tip of Baja, working with age reversal topics. So that's my area. My area is clinical medicine. So I don't work directly in technology, but what I see from the clinical perspective, treating patients one-to-one individually, is that transhumanism is now expected in the field of medicine. Everyone expects to have access to high quality biotechnology, even in the labs that they receive, the diagnosis they receive, the therapies that they receive. I work with pluripotent embryonic stem cells, which is a biotechnology of its own, and to grow these cells in a lab to keep the genetic integrity of these is expected to be top quality. So in medicine, in clinical medicine, I think it's everywhere. I was in Japan, it's expected. I was in Europe, it's expected. It's a given. I don't think people actually realize that there is a movement, a cultural and philosophical movement. It's just a part of normal human evolution that we are fusing with technology. And I see in Japan, of course, Japan is very much technologically advanced, but at the same time, they're very, very much connected to nature at the same time. So there is this fusion where even the technologies must support the human being's wellness. They must support the harmony with nature. That's expected. Here in Mexico, presently, I'm seeing there is such a disparity in economic wealth. And so the very wealthy have all the gadgets, they have all the access to all the biotechnology and medicine and in their everyday life. Yet, you go to a neighborhood next door and people barely have a barrel. So the disparity is so clear that we're nowhere near bringing the understanding of this movement to those areas of society. Very humbling, actually. Yeah.
Very interesting thoughts, Denisa. Thank you. So on the one hand, there's a lot of cause for optimism because it seems based on your discussion, the people who are able to access these transhumanist advances are willing to do so. And that seems to be a transnational phenomenon. So people in Japan, people in Mexico, but the people with more limited resources, they may not have the same awareness or recognition of the proximity of these advances. So Pam, let's see if the echo has been resolved. Hello, Pam.
Hello, is this better?
Yes, this is better. So now let's hear your thoughts about awareness and reception of transhumanism abroad.
Well, in Asia particularly, all of the things that transhumanism stands for, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, automation, living longer, I think the mainstream audience really believes in these concepts. They don't think about them as transhumanism, but they are very enthusiastic about technology. They want to be on the forefront. There's a lot of research, a lot of scientific advancement happening in Asia. So I believe amongst the scientific community, there's recognition of transhumanism, and of the mainstream community. People know about these different aspects of it, but they don't call it transhumanism, and they don't think of it as transhumanism. So I believe that there's maybe a little bit of a branding issue with the name transhumanism. People might think that's, they think of science fiction movies, they think of it maybe something a little bit weird that they don't understand, and they don't actually connect it with all the things that they really do support and that they believe in. So I think part of it is just defining what transhumanism is to the audience. And if they understood what it meant, there would be a lot more support.
Very interesting thoughts. Thank you, Pam. So it seems like we have a lot of implicit transhumanists in Asia, but I've noticed this as well, not so much explicit transhumanism because the term hasn't proliferated as much as we would like. But based on your thoughts, it seems our main goal would be to familiarize people with that term and get them to see this is really what they've been practicing all along, that this isn't something so new and freakishly different. It is the way of technological advancement.
Yeah, I believe that there is a lot of support for our core values, but maybe they don't know it.
Right.
So yes.
Yes, great thoughts there. Now let's move on to Malak. What are your thoughts on awareness and reception of transhumanism abroad? And you are on mute as well, so if you could unmute yourself.
Yes, I would agree with Pam because I'm also in Asia, and actually I travel a lot to Europe also. I've been living in the States. I go to Africa because I'm originally African. So from one country to another and from one culture to another is totally different. For example, like in UAE, the advancement in technology is amazing. Artificial intelligence, and I posted on Facebook some new healthcare center, and this center is doing amazing job using artificial intelligence to make the tests and everything that it could take 4 days. They make it in 30 minutes, and everything is robotics, and it's embraced here. So the implicit idea of or ideology of transhumanism is very strong here, but to know it as such and understand very well what is the real philosophy and what is the ideology behind and the movement, it's not known. Actually, I came across it when I was in my field in space. So I am so much into cosmism, and from cosmism I got into transhumanism, and I started advocating for it because I advocate for multiplanetary species, which is more perceived as crazy idea than transhumanism in here, because it's we need to be ready to go and live in Mars. In order to do that, we need to go through the transition and the evolution that we want to make. So that's how I got to it. And how they see it, like I said, it depends of the advancement in the country itself, how they embrace technology, how the level of consciousness they have. So it depends from one place to another. And I think what we need to do, we need to raise awareness and speak about it, regardless of what, for example, I get through social media when I introduce to some people that they don't try, I mean, they don't want to understand because they fear, they are kind of scared because they don't know exactly what is it. And we need to be persistent, and we need to go forward and present it more and more, and raise awareness.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for those thoughts, Malak. And I will add, I think of all the places in the world, Dubai looks the most transhumanist in terms of the architecture, in terms of the engineering achievements, in terms of the high-tech lifestyle that's possible there. But again, based on your comments, that seems largely to be built on implicit transhumanism. And there were some comments in the chat that have echoed this. For instance, Mike Lazine states, good points. A lot of Japanese would be transhumanists, but they wouldn't call themselves that. And BJ Murphy says, Asian culture comes off more action-oriented and based under pragmatism rather than being fixated on philosophical terminology. So there could be people in the world who will embrace our goals, not necessarily our terminology. For me, I want to see the outcomes. And the key is, with regard to promoting the philosophy, getting people to pursue those outcomes more consistently, which is why I think the term transhumanism is important. But I also recognize there are ways of approaching those goals and allies we have in this quest that might not necessarily identify themselves as transhumanists, yet still do great work. So Aria, what are your thoughts on the awareness and reception of transhumanism abroad?
Oh, well, so based in Canada anyway, my impression and based on my research is that it's largely like only really aware of in academia, and those who are aware of it, like those in the public who are aware of it, are mainly aware of it from like fiction, like movies and Black Mirror and all those sorts of shows. And so, I mean, I think that lots of people, based on like the activism that's happening these days and such, people are aware of the ideology, the issues that we are concerned with, but aren't, like as you mentioned again, that they aren't aware that it could be related to transhumanism, to our goals. And so it's just really sort of thing that's where like it's kind of I figured where if we could connect those the issues that I'm sorry, if we could connect the issues that they do care about to transhumanism, like how it relates to them. Yeah, so that's
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you for those observations, Aria. And yes, the question of getting people to relate to transhumanism, to the philosophy, or to the term transhumanism, to get them to see the relevance for their own lives, for their own futures, that's critical. That's how we grow the movement, essentially. So Mike Lazine points out that there are certain computer games that could be transhumanist in their influence. He asks, are there any Final Fantasy fans on here? And he believes those games are very transhumanist. I know Arin Vahanian, our vice chairman, has said that he was inspired to join the transhumanist movement by the game Deus Ex Human Revolution. So there are these cultural creations too that are essentially transhumanist. Sometimes they use the term, sometimes they don't, but they definitely embody a similar vision of the world. So I think this is a good bridge into our next question, which is, how do we grow the transhumanist movement and reach demographics that have not been as exposed to it, given that we have a lot of implicit transhumanism in the world? We have a lot of people also who are not aware of it, but could be sympathetic if they were aware of it. So how do we get across to them? How do we get them to identify with the term transhumanism and not just say, yes, that kind of makes sense, but yes, I've been living this way, and I have the same goals and aspirations that this term expresses. So Denisa, let's start with you. How can we grow the transhumanist movement in this way?
Hi. Okay, great. Growing. Yes, it's all about relevance, right? Whichever demographic you go to, you've got to check in what is truly relevant to that society, that network of humans, what mode of existence they live in, and how can technology, biotechnology, improve their wellness, improve their sense of connection, wellness in their society, family. It's all about relevance, really getting clear on who humans are, what mode of existence they're living in, where are they suffering, where's their pain, because ultimately transhumanism is about abolishing suffering, yeah? And really improving the human condition, allowing humans to get out of survival mode, just surviving, more towards the higher states of our purpose in our lives. Let's say, if you look at, let's say, Generation Z in California, that on the weekends they get to go and have ayahuasca ceremonies. They have different needs from transhumanism than my neighbors here in Baja, who are barely surviving. They can't even feed their dog or their children. Very different. So really getting clear on listening, finding the relevance in each demographic, and seeing how technology can lift us up, and it's a type of enhancement. Yeah. That's kind of how I view this perspective. I work with individuals. I'm not really skilled in influencing societies, particularly myself, but that's kind of how I view it. So little by little I do that in my work and in my society here.
Well, it seems to me for any given interaction, the most effective way to do it is one-on-one with a person, as you said, understanding where that person is coming from, what that person is thinking, and then responding in a way that's relevant and informing that person that essentially the goals of transhumanism are aligned with and not in conflict with what that person seeks to pursue. So I think your approach is actually one that is very powerful in being able to raise that awareness in people. The only question is, how do we scale it? How do we make it possible to apply to millions of people? And that's an open question in my mind. If any of you at any point want to chime in with your thoughts on it, feel free. But now let's hear Pam's thoughts on how do we grow the transhumanist movement, reach demographics that have not been as exposed to it.
Oh, I've got a few ideas in this area. In Asia, particularly because technology is so well embraced, social media is huge. I've got a couple of different pages that I run that quickly, picked up 20,000 to 25,000 followers on them. So people are hungry for content. So one thing we could do is develop content that we could post out on these social media pages that are geared at educating people on what transhumanism is, and that they're probably already a transhumanist and they just didn't know it. So, kind of, if we think through the key messaging that we need to portray to these millions of people and blast that out through social media. WeChat in China is huge, and it's a great way to be able to reach a lot of people very quickly and very inexpensively too. I also think we should target students. The students are more open in their thinking and their mindset. They're studying technology, they're embracing it. So if we target the university level, that's a great place to start, is by doing things at universities, whether it's speaking at events and, you know, one-on-one things, once we can all go to events again. And webinars like this, in the meantime, are fantastic. I mean, no one from Asia would participate. I mean, very few would participate today because it's 4 a.m. or about almost 4:30 a.m. in Singapore right now. But if we did, maybe we did a webinar at a time that's convenient for the Asian audience, and maybe evening time over here and morning there, we could probably attract a pretty good number of people and do another type of webinar. And perhaps the key focus would be, you know, what's transhumanism all about? And again, following our key messaging and getting some speakers that people might even recognize, tapping into well-known names of people who are transhumanists. If we can snag someone like that and put them on a webinar, I think that could draw a good audience. So those are just a few thoughts I'm throwing out for people to play around with.
Yes, indeed. Great suggestions. And I will say on social media, it's interesting. In Asian countries, there seems to be an entirely different ecosystem of social media platforms. That is, they don't necessarily use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They have their own. And there is kind of a slight permeability between those platforms. Say, someone who's Chinese American might use both, but it's rarer than one would expect. I was kind of thinking about this over the years. Why don't we have 10 million Chinese users on Facebook? Is it all because of the Great Firewall of China, or is it more just a matter of they have their own platforms which seem to work pretty well for them?
Yeah,
And
they're all on WeChat. And everything's on WeChat. Everything they do is on WeChat, whether they pay for something at the store or get a loan or order a taxi, and social media.
Yes, indeed. And reaching students is important. I have had the occasion to present to some student groups in Northern Nevada myself. And I find that there is a lot of interest, curiosity. They're open to the ideas. Sometimes they ask challenging questions, but that's a good thing. The key is they're willing to be there and to listen and to engage. So yes, there are many more opportunities for growth along these lines. And I also want to bring in a comment from the chat that was made by Mike Lazine. He says essentially that I was right with regard to social media in Asia, and Mike Lazine says he has come across a number of social media apps that are Asian. So they have their own ecosystem, and perhaps one way to penetrate it is to have more ambassadors in Asian countries who are on these platforms, who know how to use them, who are connected with people on those platforms. So now let's go to Malak. What are your thoughts on how to grow the transhumanist movement and reach demographics that have not been as exposed to it?
Yeah, I recall what Denisa said. She said relevance. I would say culture. So the key point or the key factor is the culture, is to see what is the culture in that, and actually it's almost the same, relevance and culture, they are very related. What is the culture in that country and how we can, and I talked about it yesterday when we had the event yesterday, is how to transplant the ideology of transhumanism to that culture. Because from one country to another, and I look at it as in the legal way and comparative analysis and things like this. So what we do when we have one legal system and we want to bring another set of rules, what we do is transplantation. We see that how we can integrate the transhumanism ideology into that culture, because that culture, it has a religion, it has customs, it has a lot of factors that they are different from one country to another. Now, I don't say that we need to change the whole ideology, but to make it work within that area. And the other point is about how we can reach demographics. And Pam, she talked about social media, and here in the Middle East, social media is very, very also powerful. And there is something else also in the Middle East, other than the social media platforms, is the gatherings. So it's very important inclusion. Is, for example, we have high-tech societies or people that are gathering together and communities, and to get together with these people and try to talk to them and get events or I don't know, meeting or so on, is to try to get the ideas and the values and ethics, and because it's very important, what we talked yesterday also about the values and ethics, and we see the constitution of Transhumanist Party and how it is it's very the principles are very noble. So it changed a little bit the perception and ideas of let's say the normal or the conventional constitutions that you see them in countries. So it integrates the values, the high tech, the all what is around the values and ethics of the party. So I believe that if all these efforts are joined, and also which the point that we will get into later on is the women inclusion, because what I said always, women is the engine of the society. So if you gather more and more women into a different area of the world and get them to work together and get them to talk to others and arrange gatherings and get together and get the values and also awareness is very, very important, because the woman, when she advocates for something, I'm sorry guys, but the woman always, she get it from the heart. You can see it, it's coming out. It's like it comes out with love. It's well perceived. I don't say that guys are different, but it's always the motherhood of the moment when she advocates for something. You can see it. It's beautiful. It's coming from really the heart. So these are the points that I thought about with how to reach more people outside of the US and even in the USA also, because women are very important in the advocacy of a cause. They make a difference.
Yes, thank you very much for your thoughts, Malak, and I agree. Most definitely, we are going to delve heavily into the subject of how to get more women aware of and involved in the transhumanist movement, but also with regard to your thoughts about adapting the ideas to a particular cultural and societal context, illustrating the relevance, taking these general principles from our Constitution and showing people how do they apply in this particular area, how do they relate to their values. For instance, in Dubai, I think our Constitution would be a great fit. And I would love to see the formation of, say, Islamic transhumanist groups in Dubai, where I think there's a lot of understanding there already about how Islam can be reconciled with advanced technology. So it's not that far of a step then to attach the term transhumanism to it and say, look, this is about improving the human condition. It's about making life better for everyone so that you can live according to your chosen values. You have the freedom to do that, and you have the opportunity to do that in an abundant society. So Osunakachi Akuma Kalu has a comment. He says, Janati, I think what Malak is trying to say is inculturation, gradual acquisition of the characteristics and norms of a culture or group by a person, another culture, etc., for integration. Would you say he characterized it accurately, that you were talking about this inculturation idea?
He talked philosophically, I talked legally.
Ah, okay.
So they both actually have the same meaning, but we said it differently. So yeah, he talk different language always. Me and Osina Kachi, we mean the same thing, but we talk differently. Yeah, he did.
Well, nice. There's some cross-pollination of disciplines going on here, which is excellent. And before we go to Aria, I wanted to highlight a comment that BJ Murphy made. He says, Pam nailed it. Chinese people can easily access our platforms via VPNs without issue or government pushback. It's simply they have their own social media architecture, which we do well to embrace as well. And I think that speaks to the value of having a diverse and geographically distributed network of advocates, so that we have people who are able to cover the Chinese social media platforms and spread the ideas of transhumanism there. And these don't have to be the same people as the ones who are posting on American social media platforms. Ultimately, no one of us can cover the entirety of the world. We need to team up and have at least loose alliances in engaging in these efforts. So now let's go to Aria. Aria, what are your thoughts on how to grow the transhumanist movement and reach demographics that have not been as exposed to it?
Right. So, sorry. So I should have expanded it a tiny bit from the earlier question, where what's the reception of transhumanism abroad? And one of those things that I found from speaking to people is that there is a perception that transhumanism is mainly the concerns of, well, rich white men, where like the technology such as longevity is only really accessible to those who can afford it, where the ideology is largely been dictated by men, by white men, and at least that's where it's coming out in mainstream media anyway. So so like in terms of reaching demographics, one of the reasons why I started the Canadian Transhumanist Party was try to change that perception of the rich white male sort of narrative, to be able to connect communities that aren't usually able to access that sort of ideology. Like even it has a strong academic sort of connection, and even academia is largely inaccessible to a lot of people, especially those who are low income or who haven't had access to education to that level, or those sorts of things. So when I originally started the party, I really wanted it to be a grassroots type effort, like speaking to the marginalized communities, like connecting with them, hearing out their concerns, and then, like as I was saying before, how it connects to the transhumanist ideology, trying to address their concerns, and then like try to give them answers in a transhumanist context, so that our ideas, and the future that we all want, can be accessible to them, so that it's still affordable for them to access. And so like I mean, we all sort of want the same thing in terms of our transhumanist future, but I'm sure there are lots of people that that aren't being addressed, that aren't being included in the conversation. And I feel that if we really want to grow the movement beyond this whole echo chamber that we have, it's really important to connect to those communities in order to convey those ideas, to say that, hey, your concerns are actually our concerns as well. and we have possible ideas, or we want to be able to speak to you to be able to incorporate your ideas, your concerns and such into our sort of ideologies, or our sort of set of values and such. Yeah, that's kind of what I got.
Yes, thank you, Aria. And I think these areas are quite important to consider. And you're right about the occasional perception of transhumanism that you mentioned. It's a perception we have been trying to overcome. Of course, doing so is a gradual process. And I have some thoughts along these lines. For instance, the US Transhumanist Party made the decision to make membership free and open to anybody in the world. And that helps because historically, a lot of the transhumanist events have been quite expensive. They require travel. It's essentially something that people would only do if they already knew others within the transhumanist circles. And then those circles would meet and interact. But with the US Transhumanist Party, we wanted something broader based, something more inclusive. I've sometimes said this is the working class transhumanists organization, because we are free and accessible to people all over the world. And it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter essentially what your ability is to pay $500 to participate in a conference, because we have resources for you that are free of charge. But with regard to including people of different demographics, that's also important. We need ultimately the whole world to embrace the transhumanist vision and see it as relevant to people's lives individually. So building that connection, reaching out to people proactively is very important. And I think what you said paralleled what Denisa said. Denisa has found a lot of success in one-on-one interactions where she's able to explain these ideas. She's able to explain why someone in a particular situation would find them appealing. And other people's situations may just be very different from our own, to the extent that we might not even be aware of how different they are. But hopefully over time, that awareness will dawn on us as we have more of these interactions. And there are some interesting comments from the audience before we go into the next question, which is very much relevant. So BJ Murphy says, poor people in low-income cities look up to the cosmos and dream of the world of tomorrow just as much as a rich person in Silicon Valley. Their differences lie in access and means. Thank you, Aria. And Mike Lazine says, yeah, you were right, Gennady. It is like with a number of conventions that are tech-based, they are inclusive to those in those industries, and those who are not in those industries can't go. So I think historically, the issue hasn't been one of a lack of intent to include. I think there has often been a desire to get more people to participate, including in the tech conferences. It's just a matter of sometimes there's a disconnect between the desire to get people to participate and the means that have been made available for people to participate. And that's an issue we definitely need to discuss to a greater extent. But I think your comments, Aria, are a great bridge into our next question, which is how to overcome the gender disparity in the transhumanist movement. And I'll give some background on this because I'm monitoring statistics for membership in the US Transhumanist Party. And it is approximately 85% male, 15% female. But over the years, this proportion has actually improved. And the people I've been speaking to, leading figures in our movement like Aubrey de Grey, have told me essentially, if you're getting 15% of your membership as female, you're actually doing a very good job relative to what the proportion has been in the past. So there seems to be an issue, and the issue is rooted somewhere farther back in our history. And we're working our way toward, let's say, more proportionality, more inclusion, but we're still not reaching as much of a female audience as we should be. And that's a problem for all of the reasons that Malak explained, that you really can't have the penetration of ideas into a society unless you have significant buy-in from the women in that society. It seems to me, from my personal experience, if the women in a particular group or environment are aware of a set of ideas or a set of undertakings, that awareness, it kind of permeates the entire background of that society. And things happen even behind the scenes that someone like me wouldn't be aware of, but all of a sudden there are all of these great events, initiatives, everyone is aware of everything. Whereas if you don't have that, you kind of still have silos of ideas where some people might be having these conversations, but they're not reaching everywhere. So what can be done to overcome this gender disparity? Clearly, for the women on this panel, you are sympathetic to transhumanism. You've been involved in our movement. So you have gotten it in a way that I think it's important to convey to other women in the world. How do we reach them? So Denisa, let's hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, I'm going to come at this from the perspective of a woman who's a physician, who's a writer, who's a poet, very feminine. My angles are always kind of hyper feminine in general. So just know that that's the flavor I'm coming in with. What I have when I first learned about transhumanism, what drew me is the abolition of suffering. As a woman, as a physician, I'm really always on the lookout for what could ease the suffering of the human or of the sentient being. This is just almost encoded in my DNA and a lot of women's DNA. I'm not speaking for all the women, because a lot of women are living wounded feminine frequencies, living in the kind of hyper masculine patriarchal model and surviving in it, and they take on the characteristics of doing and aggression and achieving. You know, there's a difference between performance and creation. And performance is very masculine language, and creation is more feminine. When I hear that, I'm hearing it. And where it becomes relevant is when women come to me. I've treated thousands of women, and when I see them coming in with a very hyper masculine type of drive to achieve, to do, to create, to put out, their physiology suffers. We are just different bio-oscillating machines than so hormonally and metabolically, it's just different, right? So what I'm seeing is that a lot of the languaging that I found at the beginning when I came into transhumanism was very very masculine in flavor. Yeah, so I had to kind of sift through it to arrive at someone like David Pierce, who talks about, you know, bliss, and who talks about abolishing suffering. There was a lot of sifting a lot of trust I had to have, because I believe we can design the future. And women's voices are extremely important in this movement, because we've given birth. I mean, we get what humanity needs, you know, viscerally. So just kind of you know, start sifting through the language of even like the Immortalist magazine is the editor is Denora. She's a woman, so it has already, she's an artist, so it has a lot more of the mythical poetic epistemology versus just the industrial corporate scientific and a colorless science, right? So a little bit of the flavoring needs to shift, maybe having some women who are running discussion groups, or just accenting the bliss versus the ecstasis of it. Yeah. That's kind of how I talk about it in my work. And of course, I do this all from the perspective of my online brand for women, Bliss Design, and it's very futuristic. It's about the future femme, and it doesn't have that colorless science languaging. It's very poetic. It's very mythical. You know, let's say Malak, you know, I would talk about justice is essentially mercy. And woman gets that like immediately, and the evolved masculine gets that immediately. So a little bit of that, I would say, would bring in awakened, evolved, modern women. Touch of that from my perspective.
Very interesting. And of course, you do that very well, Denisa. And you mentioned Immortalists magazine. That's a publication I highly recommend. And I myself try to contribute to it every chance that I get. A lot of the others on this meeting have contributed articles or interviews to it. So yes, that's a great publication for building these kinds of bridges. But it almost seems like being able to do that messaging to women effectively requires one to be a woman, because it is difficult, being male, for instance, to get into that frame of mind. On the other hand, if a woman is to do the messaging, she would be able to reach other women, and it would be complementary messaging. So we could have the more, let's say, scientific, dry, rational messaging, and the messaging that you described that appeals to the sense of bliss. But it seems like the people to do it, the people to engage in that messaging, would be the women in the transhumanist movement. What do you think about that?
Well, that's an interesting point. However, a lot of women are very corporate speak, very, you know, it just, you can hear it from an, even from a, it's not about, I think, man and woman, it's about the yin and the yang, where we are on that spectrum of consciousness and how we integrate both. And there is the wounded yin, which is the shamed, and there is the wounded yang, which is the aggressive, and there is the healthy yin, which is the, you know, the sovereign, the receiving energy, and there is the healthy yang, that is the upholding the sovereignty, the action, the creation. So I think it's not necessarily man woman, it's just has to be the kind of person who can see the big picture and say, we actually, as transhumanists, we are here to abolish suffering. We are here to ease the pain of being in the flesh. So, and technology can really help. And there is a lot of technology that is just noise and BS, and we can see it. You can't fool us anymore, especially after this this COVID time and what happened with the Black Lives Matter and Me Too before that. You know, the consumers are becoming really lucid. People can see where is really healthy languaging that speaks to perennial nature and need of the human to suffer less, to feel more happiness and peace. I mean, ultimately, why else, right?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And I agree. There are these common goals. Men and women both suffer a lot due to the limitations of their biology. Sometimes the suffering manifests itself in different ways, but we have these common objectives of overcoming it, of transcending it, of living better lives. And I think that perspective is very important. Ultimately, transhumanism speaks to those core motivations in humans. We all want to live better. We all want to live longer. We all want to not feel pain. We all want to feel more effective as individuals. And it's interesting, you mentioned creation as being a term that appeals to women to a greater extent. I've used it often as well in my own discussions, particularly when it comes to art, music, and scientific innovation. The inventor creates something that hasn't been there before. So do you think there's maybe an opportunity there to use that term as a kind of bridge?
Yeah, in the Immortalist magazine, in the second issue, I wrote an article about the physicality and the metaphysicality of the future human. And there I brought forth the argument that the mind of the future human functions a lot more in the flow state. Instead of the hyperfrontality, hypercognitive, hyperintellectual, we drop into the flow states a lot more. And the Flow Genome Project, run by Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel, defined the flow state as the ultimate state of consciousness where you perform your best. And to me, immediately, as a author in the area of flow, but more feminine, I'm like, not just perform, you create your best. And that's the most innovative state of mind. That's when all your, all the voices come off and you start to, as they say, you start to download cosmic collective consciousness and you start creating what's right instead of what's egoic. Yeah. So in that case, I kind of added in, it's the altered state of consciousness where you feel timelessness, selflessness, richness, effortlessness, and you perform and you create your best. And there you have the yin and the yang in perfect balance. And that's the flavoring I feel needs to come a little more into the transhumanist epistemology. It's very performance enhancement based. It's kind of cool, but it's not really speaking to the human heart all the time. And that's interesting.
Yes, the concept of flow, it's a fascinating one, and I've been aware of it since I was a teenager. I can say I've experienced it maybe around 10 times in my life, and it's been quite powerful when I have experienced it. That could be a discussion all of its own, though, how to induce that state of flow, that state of effortless creativity. I definitely would want that to happen more often these days, but to be honest, the times I experienced it was when I was on summer vacation from high school and college, and I didn't have one commitment after another to attend to. So that's interesting as well.
Well, I would say you're a runner, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so the first 20 minutes is pure one-on-one suffering. And then physiology changes and you drop into the flow state. That's what it is. In that moment, you can use that state to perform, have a great run, and download ideas, start forming connections because you know that your brain is switching to a different signature. And that's the future human, is functioning more in that runner's high.
Yes, that would be a wonderful state to be able to harness. So thank you, Denisa, for those thoughts. And there's a lot more to delve into there. But now let's go to Pam. And what are your thoughts regarding how can we get more women to be involved in the transhumanist movement?
Well, I'll shift the conversation a little bit. Let's assume we have the messaging right. Now talk about the target audience that we're going after. If we want to increase the number of women, some low-hanging fruit, I believe, might be women that are in science and technology. And there's a lot of women's organizations in science and technology. For instance, if you've heard of STEM, this is a women's group, science, technology, engineers, and mathematics. And there are a lot of subgroups of STEM across the country and also internationally. I'll be in a panel discussion later this week talking about the post-COVID workplace to a STEM group. And I think groups like this, groups like Asian Women in Business, associations for women in science, women in technology, women who are in these fields are going to be likely to embrace our concepts. And that's a really good place to start. It's a warmer audience, and getting to be parts of discussions that they're already having like this, and participating in their panel discussions and having the chance to talk about the issues that we embrace in transhumanism, I think would be really helpful in attracting more of a female audience.
Yes, and that's a great point. We do have women in tech fields, and they're a constituency that is closer to transhumanism and the origins of transhumanism than perhaps some other female constituencies would be. So it is a natural place to start and kind of reach out proactively, but perhaps the distance that one would need to travel to reach them would be shorter than for other demographics. So
yeah, start with the easier ones, the lower hanging fruit, and then we can work our way as we grow.
Yes, and perhaps if we reach more of those women, they can be ambassadors for other women as well to become exposed to these ideas, because they have their own social networks that they can reach out to.
Yeah, and I think they might get our current messaging a little bit more easily, until we reach the point where we've got, the flow embraced in our messaging, as Denise has just described. Women in science and technology are probably a little bit more rational thinking and can accept today's messaging more easily.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you for those thoughts, Pam. And now, Malak, we have you back on. Hopefully, if your connection holds, we'd be quite interested in hearing your thoughts on how to overcome the gender disparity in the transhumanist movement.
First of all, sorry, because I wanted to hear Denisa, what she was saying, very interesting, and I was cut off. My internet wasn't stable. Anyway, I will go back and hear what she was saying on YouTube video. So remember when I've seen the change in role, and I am the one who came in the big guys group, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? Why there's no women there? And I raised concerns, because this is what I do. I advocate for women's rights, and I see there's no equality over there. So and I, of course, it's not to say you are not making the right inclusion or whatever, because now we need to understand why we don't have a lot of women there, because you said that 15% only there are members, I believe. This is what you said, Kennedy. And what I'm thinking about is, like, why don't we make questionnaires and see what are perception of women toward transhumanism, and how they see it, and why they wouldn't come forward and advocate the cause. I think we start from that side and see what is the problem and try to work around it and see why until now, and you've been active for some time, and why they're coming forward like I did, and I came across you through Osinakachi and through Tafts, and I went through and I dived around, and I read a lot, and I write, and I make researches, and I embrace the idea because it goes with my purpose. And talking about my purpose is about betterment of humanity at the end of the day, with all the activities that I'm doing in my life, from advocating women's rights, combating human trafficking, engaging into space economy, space sustainability, multiplanetary species. So I do all this, and I found you are what really goes, like your ideology, transhumanism, it goes with my purpose. Your purpose is it's really interrelated, and it is what we need to become multiplanetary species. To combat human trafficking, we need also that tricks and the problems that is going on in human mind, that it can be fixed and it can be changed with let's say the super intelligence that transhumanism can bring into to people. So can you imagine if we talk like this to women and explain to them what we can achieve together with this cause? I mean, all the problems can be fixed. Let's hopefully we say that let's say I see always the light at the end of the tunnel, and I see the good thing about what can a cause bring to humanity, and I go for it. So I go back to the first point. What I said is questionnaire, and we see what is going on in women's mind why they're not embracing it. Is it a problem of awareness, or there are other problems that we could try to address it and make sense and make inclusion and get them on board?
Yes, very, very good thoughts there, Malak. And I like the questionnaire idea. I'm thinking to distribute that questionnaire, it would be worthwhile to send it both to women who are already involved with transhumanism and with our organization, as well as to some women who aren't, but who may be somewhat aware of it, but have certain reservations. What is interesting is, in my own personal experience, I have noticed a kind of difference between the let's say, gender ratios of the people who like my personal Facebook posts and the gender ratios of the people involved in the US Transhumanist Party, in the sense that with my Facebook posts, I think they are liked about equally by female audiences as well as by male audiences. So it's not a matter of personal presentation or, in my view, the personal proclivities or behaviors of anyone in the movement. It's something more systemic about perception. But I'll also say this, and this has been my observation about the women in the transhumanist movement. They are a lot more likely than the typical male transhumanist, if you would, to rise to a position of prominence or leadership. There are a lot of famous female names in transhumanism right now. Think about someone like Liz Parrish or Natasha Vida-Moore or Maria Entrigas Abramson. As examples, those are very prominent women. Bernadine Brown of People Unlimited is another example. And it seems that the path is there, the path is open, but my observation is the women who choose to take that path, they're very confident, they're very aware of who they are, what they stand for, they're not hesitant to speak up, they're not hesitant to assert their beliefs, and you're very much the sort of person, Malak, which is why you got involved in transhumanism. You expressed your ideas very clearly, and it's actually fairly easy for a woman like that to be involved in our movement because we're all about the ideas. And if somebody's expressing these ideas to us, great, we're engaging with them. There are, it seems to me, still a large number of women who are kind of hesitant to express themselves in that way. And that is perhaps the demographic we're not reaching, but we should be reaching somehow. What do you think about that?
Personality counts when a person, like a woman, and I think you know me by now, and you see my posts, and I like to push the limits. I like to go forward. I have a voice, and what I say always, I came out from a culture where at that time, and when I left my country, it was, I left because I did not have a voice, because of the culture, because I needed to just follow the trend and live, let's say, a double life, because actually I am outgoing and I'm outspoken and everything, but I need to take care of the culture and I need to be the woman that it's not me. So that's why I left at the first place. And when I left and I said I have a voice, I would never shut up. I would never be quiet. As long as I'm right, and as long as I get myself around people that they are very rational also, because we're human sometimes, and outspoken people sometimes they have that you know, it's a problem, because before I get let's say at this mindset, I would act or react because I'm too passionate with my things, a little bit without, let's say, thinking twice. Okay, at this moment is like, I know myself, I'm very confident, I know what I want, and I know what I want to go, and I know what to embrace. And I got to the point that nothing can stop me. It's what I want. And that's why when we crossed each other through Osinakachi, and I learned a lot from him. He's watching me on YouTube right now, I'm sure, and Goffredo also, and I see Tom Ross and all the people that they are in the community. I learned a lot from them in short time. And I'm a member with you since how long now? 2 months maybe, or less. So the idea and the ideology, it was there already. But what I needed to learn more and get exposed. And I'm sure a lot of women out there, they are. Now, the difference between a person with a strong personality and a person that's shy or cannot go out to the public, this is another thing, because one-on-one, as Denisa said, talk, it's very, very important, because this touch the person like it is more intimate, and it works very, very well. It's different than what I do. What I do is go to the public and speak, and I get thrown stones every day. But I'm used to it, and I have what I say. I have my background, and I have people that they are backing me up, and this is what I say about the purpose. You need to find the people that gravitate in the same orbit you are. So like that, they are with you and they back you up. So now what we need joint forces. The people like Denisa, that she's encountering people every day, and she talk, and she has one-on-one relationship, and people that they are outspoken, and they go outside and let's say spread the word, spread awareness, and they advocate in a way, even if they are misjudged, misperceived, or thrown stones at, or whatever. So I'm fine. Sometimes I would be very, very down, but at the end of the day, I say, I do it for my son. I don't do it for myself. So I look at my son. I look at the generation. This is what I do. What I do is I touch people's life, and what I advocate for probably is not going to happen today. It's going to happen to tomorrow. At the end of the day, if I could change something, I go for it, and I will never back up.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Malak, for your remarks. And again, it seems like the personal outreach approach is one of the most effective tools we have. So to bring people in through a network of individuals whom they can connect to and whom they can trust, that it's not so much about mass messaging. There's enough of that with regard to what transhumanism is. It's about getting that messaging to be recognized as relevant to an individual. And it's easier to bring a person into a movement when others whom they know and respect are in that movement. And those are the people they're comfortable having conversations with. And you and I, Malak, are probably comfortable having a conversation with almost anybody, but that's not most of humanity, it seems to me. And the challenge is, indeed, how do you find the right person to connect to someone who might be a bit more on the shy end?
Can I tell you?
Yes.
Actually, first of all, around me, like my surroundings, I speak to, and they get interested, and they want to know more. And this, when they want to know more, the journey starts for them. So it depends also on the level of consciousness of these people. So because like I said, it's not easy to try to explain to someone on a one-on-one basis if they are taken away by different thoughts, that they think everything other than what they think is wrong. So like that, I think you waste your time, or you try and try and try, but at the end of the day, something personal to that person, to get to a certain level of consciousness to understand and think out of the box and get all, you know, the ideas that he learned before since his childhood or whatever, and he doesn't want to let go. And the other thing is, like, what I do, I have a lot of requests on Facebook from people to ask me to send them details and send them videos to understand what I'm talking about.
Yes, indeed.
So
yes, indeed.
it's if they start being interested and you talk to the mass, and the mass can start ask and request, can you explain to me? It's very important. That's why I make a lot of, when I talk in social media and accept my friends and so on, what I do is, like, I don't choose always or whatever. I have diversity. I have people from all walk of life, not only the party and people that they are coming from high-tech society and so on. So the others are very important because they need to understand and they need to know. And when I get requests, always I'm there, I help, I dive through and so on. And like I said, the power of women is of convincing, and I am a legal person, so persuasion persuasion is my thing. So and patience also. Patience is very, very important, because sometimes they try to be a little bit too much, aggressive in the beginning, but at the end of the day, when I'm nice and explain and so on, they go and they try to understand and they try to know more. But also, yes, the one-on-one is very important. Like that I said, we need to have people in different countries that they are the focal point for the party, and they go and make activities and do things based on, let's say, the culture, how it is. Is it gathering? Is it more social media?
Yes, and indeed, that's the aim of the Foreign Ambassador program that the US Transhumanist Party started at the recommendation of BJ Murphy, our Director of Foreign Relations. In fact, we do have an opening for a foreign ambassador for the UAE, just saying, but the foreign ambassador's role is precisely that, to essentially create this local nexus for the community spread, if you would, of transhumanist ideas. So this would be a point person, someone to hold events, someone to speak with people, reach out to them, connect them in a way that's relevant to them, to their concerns, their culture, the circumstances of their lives. And it seems that there is a lot of good that could be done by someone essentially who's an influencer within a community, someone who's not afraid to have these discussions, someone who has a lot of perseverance, a lot of patience, as you said, who's willing to engage with people who might not get it right away, but who's willing to maintain a friendly, approachable demeanor that gets these people to realize perhaps there's something more to these transhumanist ideas than they originally thought. So great thoughts there. And BJ says, yes, Malak, we'd love to have you join and provide your expertise. So you saw it for...
Got it. Just kidding.
Well, thank you. Now, let's hear from Aria. How do you think we can overcome the gender disparity in the transhumanist movement?
It's kind of like echoing Denisa earlier and Malak. So I'm coming from, my perspective is coming from kind of a transgender queer perspective. And so I feel that first I should point out that the gender is not a binary. It goes beyond the binary. There's also non-binary and genderqueer and other sort of gender identifications. I just wanted to put that out there first. And then so I think some ways that we could try to overcome the disparity is to, so as I was saying earlier, like how, like, at least in Canada, from based on my observations and research, that there is this perception that it's the white male, rich white male sort of narrative. I think that it's important for some, I guess, the more prominent male figures in our movement to be intentionally holding space for female voices, for non-binary voices, you know, and their concerns. And it's also like kind of driving the point across that transhumanist issues are also feminist issues. I mean, and are also queer issues as well. Because there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of, we share the same goals. I'm reminded of this meme a friend sent me recently, is like one of those, this is the future the liberals want, you know, where it gives an example of like someone, I forgot who was quoted, I think it was Laura Ingram or somebody, says that like this future that we want is to destroy gender or something along those lines, and we've all become part human, part machine. And so it's not exactly, you know, quite like that, but it does kind of have that message that, you know, we want to transcend our, you know, our human condition. We want to become better people. And that's not necessarily dependent on, you know, coming from a person's gender or, you know, such. So my point being is that it should be transhumanism should be an ideology that transcends gender and transcends those sorts of you know, egotistical sort of, you know, in a sense, drives. So so I was thinking like, you know, transhumanism is from at least, so sorry. When I've created a community of transhumanist women. This group on Facebook, it's still a bit small, but that's considering the size of the female transhumanist community, it's kind of small. That's kind of expected. But I remember from that community, that group, that there was largely been an emphasis on transhumanist issues in relation to women, such as reproductive technologies. And it obviously goes beyond that, but it's interesting that that's where it seems to be the focus. So what I you know, think is that I'm kind of all over the place, I'm sorry. Where I think it's kind of important is to, as I was saying earlier, is to kind of um, recontextualize the ideology to be more appealing, again, more accessible to those who, to the people who have trouble relating to, you know, the future of, you know, far future sort of ideals, and it, and so like it's yeah, I'm sorry. That's, yeah. That's all I got.
Yes, a lot of interesting thoughts there, and I would say most definitely the transhumanist movement is one that, in terms of the philosophy, would be one of the most accepting places in the world for, say, transgender individuals, because they're using technology to change their condition to something they want it to be. And
and in fact, like lots of trans people that I know and have spoken to, and just from the communities, is that lots of trans people are actually transhumanist because of the freedoms and the technology that, you know, we sort of do follow. Even if we don't realize it ourselves, we do eventually end up connecting with it in some way or form.
Yes, and I think you're correct. Gender is more than just male versus female. There are some people who don't identify with a gender at all, or who have other gender identifications, but also in the future, if you have sentient AI, what gender is that sentient AI going to have? Is that even going to make sense if the AI is a digital program or some sort of android? And I know there is a lot of popular science fiction that tries to give these androids male or female genders. I think that's more of a kind of anthropocentric conceit, trying to make these entities more relatable. But why does a robot need to be male or female? There's absolutely no point to it. I mean, a robot could be a dodecahedron with a cube on top. There's absolutely no reason to ascribe a gender to that kind of entity. And yet, with transhumanist concepts, it's important to consider, well, what would a future look like where that entity is sentient and that entity might not think in terms of gender or care? So yes, it's important to maintain that openness and maintain that inclusivity. And I hope people recognize the US Transhumanist Party is a place where individuals who don't identify with conventional gender roles or perspectives on gender are still quite welcome. And we do hope to have more of their voices, more of their contributions. The future is going to be a lot more diverse in this regard as well. So having these kinds of conversations now is a good way to prepare for that. So thank you for your input on this question, how to overcome the gender disparity in the transhumanist movement. There are a lot more conversations that can be had on this, including in later stages of this forum. I will say one thought that comes to mind is this is definitely a gradual task. So there's not some switch that we can flip to make, let's say, gender parity and representation the case for the transhumanist movement right away. I wish there could be some switch that we could flip. I wish there could be some sort of mass media announcement that we could put out, and then all of a sudden all the women in the world would recognize that transhumanism is relevant to them, and we would have 99% female membership instead for some reason, but it would be a much larger absolute membership. I would certainly welcome that, but unfortunately that's not going to happen. So we have to continue the more piecemeal, gradual, effort intensive ways to approach that goal. But there is another question in this conversation that I think is relevant for that and relevant to the other matters we discussed about awareness and reception of transhumanism. And those are, what are the issues and conversations that you think transhumanists could emphasize for greater public appeal? And that doesn't necessarily have to mean reaching women, though it could. It could mean reaching anybody, larger numbers of people. So Denisa, what are your thoughts on that?
So I'll go back to what I said in the beginning. It's all about really remaining relevant, keeping your fingers on the pulse of what's going on for humans in every different area of the world. Being really relevant. You know, Martin Heidegger in 1977, he wrote an essay called The Question Concerning Technology. And in there, he noted that technology is essentially a way of revealing and always kind of really coming back to who is the humanity that we need to be revealing in the next phase to survive, to overcome the challenges, let's say the environmental catastrophes or pandemics or, you know, riots and people rising up and going, come on, we're awake now. You can't fool us anymore. Really being relevant to that. And how can technology help to reveal the beauty of humanity, the benevolence of humanity, the healing ability of humanity, that you know, we are all wounded. Sentience essentially comes in and gets wounded and then repairs it for the rest of its life, right? How does technology come in and really, we can't do this without technology in the next phase. We can't. So really staying relevant to the issues at hand and communicating about what we're revealing, what we can do to ease the suffering, to ease the struggle. It's real. The struggle is real. And we felt it even ourselves being stuck at home for 3 months. I mean, yes, it was nice being on your computers and Zoom calls and this and that, but you know, those folks who don't have the savings or who don't have the support from their government, they felt it. They can't buy food for their kids. It's survival 101 again, boom. So really bringing forth the relevance of these times, always keeping relevant. Don't go into hyper philosophies, hyper ideation. Keep really relevant. Keep your ear to the ground. That's what I would feel. Any issue that comes in the news, transhumanists can comment on it that same day. I feel.
Yes, indeed. I think that's important. That's one reason why we formed the social media team, so that we could have a quick, coordinated response that essentially takes any given issue of the day and explains how technology can actually solve a lot of these intractable problems, how technology can make life better for the people affected, and how transhumanism works into it. We had, for instance, a great set of platform planks that the US Transhumanist Party adopted in response to COVID-19. I just wish that more people were aware of them. So yes, having that ability to respond, to project the message out there when there is an emerging event that concerns a lot of people is very important. I hope we can do more of that coming up, because it seems like the pace of these kinds of events that all eyes in the world are on, essentially, is accelerating, and the people who have the answers about how to solve these problems are going to get a lot more visibility.
Yeah, and you know, I felt that a lot of the transhumanist parlance is very conservative in its analysis. You know, keeps with, you know, the vaccine is coming, don't worry. That's not the solution. The immune system is the solution, but you have to have both of the arguments happening at the same time, because people are smart now. They understand it's not, you know, we can't count on the status quo to give us really quality data and information. So transhumanists have to be kind of on the ball of all of these angles and perhaps work as a sense-making community.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So bringing forth awareness of new possibilities and other possibilities besides those in the mainstream media narrative. And you're right, Denisa. Some people are going to get COVID-19, other people aren't. The people who aren't may be doing something to affect their chances of not getting it. And I think that's an important message to communicate as well. That just because we don't have a vaccine yet doesn't mean there's nothing that one can do in order to avoid the worst fallout of this pandemic.
And even having some transhumanists who believe that I'm not going to touch that vaccine at all. Don't bring that anywhere near me. Having those transhumanists come on and say, well, what's your thinking around this? How are you coming to this logical conclusion? And so having all of these angles explored is valuable.
All right, thank you, Denisa. And we have a comment in the chat that I think is relevant to this conversation. Edward Hudgens writes, we should transcend identity politics that's divisive. We have birth attributes, ethnicity, race, sex, and we should accept of each other. Let's focus on our individual aspirations plus goals that we share. So this is a kind of broader public appeal on shared values, shared goals that everyone can agree on. So now let's go to Pam. What do you think are some issues and conversations that transhumanists could emphasize for greater public appeal?
Well, to me, the biggest issue that we face today is that of death and dying. it needs to be cured. And it's the biggest mission of our group. And if we can solve that, we can start to solve the other problems too. Like think about on the airplane when your oxygen mask drops, you want to put your own mask on first, and then you can help save the person next to you. Well, we need to all solve the issue of death and dying and improve longevity so that we can start to solve all the rest of the problems and help more of humanity. So to me, that's the most pressing issue that's on our plate. And that's what attracted me most to the transhumanism movement in the very beginning. So for me, that's number one. And I think COVID has really accentuated the issue of, of older people being more, being more at risk to COVID, having more severe implications from it. So I think it's a topic that people are thinking about right now that is a bit more mainstream, and it might be the right time to tackle this one more publicly.
Yes, indeed. And we've had a lot of conversations within the transhumanist community about this, that if only the public were to understand just how disproportionately heavily COVID-19 affects the biologically old. Yeah. The median age of death from COVID-19 is in the 80s. And if senescence were reversed, this pandemic would be a blip on the radar screen, so to speak. And if only people were aware of that, I think they would be much more interested in the fight to reverse biological aging and would advocate for investing the resources into that fight. I agree with you. I think that's essentially the number one realization that we need people to grasp about transhumanism and what the goals of transhumanism are. Ultimately, you can't have a future of any sort if you're not alive. And we're trying to keep as many people alive as possible so that they could make it to a future of abundance, prosperity, happiness.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. You think of it as Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the pyramid. Longevity and life is the bottom of the pyramid. We'll cover that, and then you can go up and up and up on the pyramid.
Right.
Yes. Relevant issues.
Yes, exactly. And going back to broadening our appeal, that's a goal for everybody, whether you're male or female, whatever part of the world you live, whether you're transgender, it doesn't matter because being alive, that's the fundamental condition that makes any other expression or lifestyle or pursuit possible. So great thoughts there. So Malak, what are your thoughts on issues and conversations that transhumanists could emphasize for greater public appeal? Malak, I believe you're on mute.
Yes, you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
For me, number one thing is sustainability, but I would say what is very important to touch the public is the issue of ending suffering. Because if you don't start with ending the suffering, why we would live longer if the suffering is always there? So
mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I think this is the most important thing, because like everywhere we go right now, we see people suffering from being getting into inequality, to racism, to poverty, to lack of healthcare access. So all this is getting people suffering, is getting our society everywhere kind of, let's say, we need to repair it. How we repair that? How can transhumanism repair the society? How it can reduce suffering? So I think if we start with this, with how can we reduce suffering or take it away, we start from there, because people are from all walks of life are suffering from being like I said, it's a problem with the injustice, problem with the access to healthcare, equality. So what can you do? If I ask you now and I tell you this is the main issue in the society, If I ask you, Gennady, can you tell me how you are the speaker and of the number one advocate of transhumanism? If I tell you, how can you end suffering through transhumanism? How can you answer me?
Well, I would say my answer would be, we want to dramatically accelerate the arrival of technologies that are going to enable inexpensively to address this kind of suffering for large numbers of people. So with regard to healthcare, one reason why healthcare is so expensive is that first, it's over bureaucratized, but second, it doesn't use easy technological solutions to problems to the same extent that it should. If we had a system of preventive healthcare that's integrated with personal medicine, that's integrated with emerging advances in biotechnology and nanotechnology, and you can essentially leverage vast amounts of data to develop personalized treatments that help cure your diseases and make sure that you live the healthiest life that you can. And if, based on the economies of the information age, we're able to get that out cheaply and affordably to large numbers of people, that can alleviate a lot of suffering. In terms of the other suffering, I think what is often perceived as inequality is actually scarcity, in the sense that some people don't have enough in an absolute sense. That is to say, if I had $1 million and you had $2 million, neither of us would be in a particularly problematic state, because we would be able to get all of our needs met, even though there's some relative disparity there. But the fact is, a lot of people still don't have access to the basics. And that's an issue that transhumanism can address through advances in automation, 3D printing, vertical farming, genetically modified crops. I know they're vilified in some circles, but in the developing world, they've been a massive boon for people in terms of getting access to food, and advances and protections against diseases. Imagine transhumanist technology being deployed in the fight against malaria, or, as I've spoken to Osunakachi's group, the TAFFDS, various methods could be deployed in Africa to combat the COVID-19 pandemic there. I think another aspect of transhumanism that should be emphasized is we support a rapid build out of our infrastructure and a rapid deployment of our technology to a greater extent than would happen otherwise. So in the US, the Transhumanist Party has been advocating rapid hospital construction to accommodate the wave of patients affected by COVID-19. And we've transplanted that concept into our discussions of how African countries could deal with this issue as well. So transhumanism's answer to suffering is essentially innovate more, build more, provide more to people as rapidly as possible. And indeed, our hope is everyone can live in an age of abundance sooner rather than later.
I couldn't answer it better than you, so you got it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, because individual, or let's say human capital, is what builds civilization. It's what builds societies. It's so if we start from the problem that we have right now is ending the sufferings, we thrive, and we can become multiplanetary species also. So this is my number one thing that behind the whole the purpose of me being there. So yeah, that was a brilliant answer, and I couldn't do it better.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, I couldn't. Yeah. Thank you.
And I appreciate the question, which prompted all of this. But yes, we need to have these kinds of answers ready, and we need to tell people how transhumanism as a philosophy is relevant to alleviating their suffering. So very important thoughts.
Yeah, it's very, very important also because the video I will share with a lot of people that I know, so like that they understand more about how the sufferance can be end, because they look for answers and how we could reach to a state where humanity can thrive and we transcend.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So now let us go to Aria. Aria, what are some issues and conversations that transhumanists could emphasize for greater public appeal?
Well, I think I'll start with well, when I speak one-on-one with some people about introducing them to the ideas of transhumanism, the way I describe transhumanism to them is that I start with the concept of just straight up humanism, goodwill and supporting each other and all those sorts of great things, and then I describe it as, well, think of humanism, and then think of it as an emphasis on humanism with the use of science and technology to accelerate that progress. And then it kind of extends into the ideas of like transhumanitarianism. And so using that as a base, you kind of gives into ideas such as what is a possible solution to, or at least a helpful solution to, or what might happen to everybody when automation happens. So one possibility is basic income, and so having, as Pam mentions, that the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is something I actually reference quite often. It is about having those basic needs met. Having those basic needs met, and so hopefully trying to get everyone to a state of self-actualization. Becoming better people, becoming better than they were before, being better for everyone else, whatever that means to them. And so in order to get to that place, to self-actualize, to reach their potential, whatever that means to them, is to have their needs met. And such as like universal healthcare, basic income, universal post-secondary education that is free post-secondary education, all these sorts of needs that come from infrastructure, that come from good infrastructure, is sorry, kind of met. Sorry, I'm kind of everywhere. So it's these sorts of basic ideas that really matter to the individual. That doesn't necessarily have to mean that they have to be part of something greater. It's really kind of just appealing to the individual person, and kind of giving them that route to start, to start with, to become a better person. And so it's these sorts of ideas, such as relating to the individual movements, such as I'm sorry, I'm losing my thought. It's just sorry, I'm gonna have to forget that train of thought because I've forgotten it. But it's basically just focusing on that was, as I said, transhumanitarianism. It's just using that science technology to improve the human condition. And so it's once you're able to identify those basic needs, to be able to, for someone to get to a better point, it's easier to introduce transhumanist ideology to them, if that makes sense.
So essentially, if I understand you correctly, these pre-existing basic needs that a lot of people have can be used as a gateway for them to understand transhumanism. So
Exactly.
they have the need, we can focus on the need and say, this is how transhumanism can help overcome the problem in this area.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It's taking like you know, when we think of transhumanism, we think of one of the first things many people, not necessarily us, but when we think of is like longevity. Longevity is absolutely, you know, core to our whole ideology. It's like living longer, living to see the future, and all those sorts of things. But it's like I said, like I was saying earlier, it's largely still inaccessible because lots of people perceive it to be sort of a rich. You know, you can only have a long life if you're rich. But really, it's about just advanced medical science. It's being able to use advanced medicine and technologies to improve oneself or fix oneself in whatever way. So it's just kind of being able to reframe, it's just having to reframe these ideas to be more accessible, as I keep saying.
Yes, very interesting thoughts there. And there's a comment by the Longevity channel that is relevant to this conversation. Human needs are very difficult to meet if those in question are operating from self-perceived deficiency. So it almost seems like this comment suggests some people have this defeatist attitude about whether their needs will get met at all. So they think they're suffering right now, and they're probably always going to suffer, and what's the use of even trying? And transhumanism tries to communicate to them that, no, it's important to try. It's important to try to overcome these deficiencies and see if you could get to a better life for yourself individually, as well as a better existence for our species. So sometimes this could be a motivational challenge as well, reaching people who have become pessimistic or cynical. And there are a lot of people like that in all demographics, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I feel, and, you know, based on my experience so far, is that once you're able to connect to a person on that sort of personal basis, they start to realize that these ideas, these needs, these things that they can overcome can be spread to their friends and their family, which can therefore spread from there.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So getting people into this frame of mind that these problems can be solved. They can be solved for them, for the people close to them, and ultimately for the society. That's one way where we can spread our appeal. And then we have a number of interesting comments along these lines. BJ Murphy writes, mass line thinking, it's an important tool transhumanists should integrate in their outreach, listen to the people and their struggles and provide pragmatic solutions from a transhumanist viewpoint. So that's one possible approach. Edward Hudgens says, yes, appeal to dealing with current illnesses and appeals to eliminating suffering are great appeals. With regulators blocking COVID test kits, masks, etc., we can highlight this as part of our appeal. So there are institutional barriers to the advancement of these technologies that we need to overcome. And transhumanism is not just about changing the mindset, though changing the mindset is a big part of it. It's also about changing the policies, removing the external obstacles to progress that are often quite difficult in terms of getting people the access to the treatments that they would benefit from if there's a regulatory apparatus standing in the way. So thank you, Aria. Thank you to our commenters. So now we move to the part of the salon that is a bit more flexible, but we have a number of US Transhumanist Party officers within the Zoom meeting. And I would like to ask all of you, what are any thoughts that you have or any questions that you have for our guests? Who would like to start?
Yeah, I actually have a question for Malak about space law. I was wondering about the feasibility of establishing travel and trade beyond Earth. And obviously, we're a long ways away from this actually happening. But if and when it happens in the future, what are the logistics going to be with regards to establishing trade agreements? I don't know if you've covered this in your work at any point, but what are the logistics of establishing trade agreements across, you know, not only across countries, but beyond Earth?
Actually, that's exactly the subject of my PhD thesis. It's about the space economy, sustainability, long-term sustainability, space sustainability, of course, and governance and international space law. And looking at it from my PhD work right now, I would pinpoint the issues, but I cannot reveal much because it's not yet published, so bits and pieces, so it's my findings. But the main issue right now, the existing issue, you say establishing trade. Let's not talk first about trade there. Let's talk about what's going on right now in the space economy. The space economy, satellites, business is booming. The barriers of access to space is being very reduced. Commercial actors are entering into the space field more than before. There are geopolitical issues that's going on between countries with the new space race. All these problems make it very difficult in the cradle of issues going on and legal voids with the United Nations, 5 United Nations treaties that it was enacted since like between 69 and 70 something. So until now, what is moving forward, it's not really robust. It's not addressing the main issues that's going on. Today, I was in a conference of astronomy, the International Astronomy Union, and I addressed this issue of the satellites that Elon Musk is sending to outer space, and the number of these satellites and how it can have an impact on increasing the light pollution. And the light pollution is making problems with astronomers, how they are doing their job and watching the world or whatever they do exactly. It's an issue for them to carry their activities. Other than that, also, of course, the space debris and the space debris issue, and or space junk, people they call it. It's another big issue that it's being addressed, but addressed through soft laws. Soft law and codes of conduct are not the same. They don't have the same legal effects that international treaties they have, or bilateral lateral agreements between states. So the saga is there. Now, looking at what is going to happen in the future with the Artemis project and the Artemis Accord and whatever, it will have bilateral agreements between states or agencies that they can collaborate and work together. With NASA's Artemis program is to make the first, let's say, ecosystem on lunar ecosystem, to start making the infrastructure in space. So all this is not really, it looks futuristic. It looks now, when we go back and check the feasibility of budget-wise of the countries and the private actors investment, because it's not sustainable for now. What is sustainable is the satellite industry. But if you go into asteroid mining, or you go to lunar mining and so on, to get the infrastructure, because they want to prepare the manufacturing of propellant, how they can make it in order to have the space, the infrastructure. It is very skeptical, because actually, of course, space governmental programs it's not enough to invest into these things. So what they want is they want to include the commercial actors. The commercial actors, they are for the new space activities other than the satellite, they are surviving on billionaire investments, let's say Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and so on. And some of the venture capitalists that they are putting money, and they say the return on investment is incredible. And for now, with the research and everything, there's no yet return on investment on these things, of course, because it's still in the early stages of the prospect and so on. So the future, it is unclear in the situation that is going on between the countries right now. United States, China, that it's acting. United States is acting unilaterally. China is doing the same thing. So there's a problem with the geopolitics, and they're not keen to finalize any agreements or any space treaties. So the economy is booming, and it's like how to make it sustainable for the future, and how to reduce the harm that it's going on right now with the issues of the space junks, space debris, and which is the main issue going on right now. There is soft law, and of course the other one is how to make it peaceful, to make the exploration for peaceful purposes. And also there's an issue with that, because we don't know what's going on with China is doing on its own, and there's no feasibility with these issues. So it's a saga going on, and that's why I advocate for space sustainability. And space sustainability is not only environmental protection; it has the spheres of sustainable development, and the principle of sustainable development are echoing. So you have also the economic factor, and you have the social factor on Earth. And we don't know later on what's going to happen, and that's what we look at it in a futuristic way, because always the law is going very, very slow, in a slower pace. And that's the problem with Kennedy, with the policies right now, is like how to push the policies for transhumanists to be embraced, and to be a little bit, and let's say not ahead of the technological development, but in a way that it can at least cope and not be so much into back. I've done, and I wrote articles about telemedicine. And telemedicine is not democratized yet. It's a problem with it, because the states are really being very difficult into accepting a lot of the way how to make it. You know, the telemedicine, it wasn't very known in, for example, countries like UAE. Now with the COVID-19, it started and it's working well. So this is the issue with how the development is going, and it's one of the issues at the party also, and how the policies are coping with this. And actually, if the technological development is always not going, the law is not going at the same pace as the development, we are staying in that, we are stuck in one place, and we cannot move forward, because the matrix is still there, and there's an issue.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Malak, for those remarks. And there is definitely a wealth of information there. And you had also appeared on an interview with Steel Archer on the Detonation Show, where you discussed a lot of these issues regarding to space law and how it would apply to space exploration and the challenges to overcome. There have been a lot of comments in the chat about this that we can get to soon. Denisa Rensen did say that she needs to depart now, but thank you, Denisa, for sharing your thoughts with us. And if you do have any closing remarks that you would be willing to offer for our consideration, feel free to provide those. Let's see. don't think she's on the line at present, but I'll keep that as an open offer. I'll highlight a few comments from the chat. BJ Murphy says, cities survive from imports and exports, i.e. trade and space. This would be much more difficult, but it could be addressed via advanced 3D printing, which could be monetized via digital currencies. Mike Lazine says, but with 3D printing, you still need the materials and so on for the 3D printing to work, just like needing ink for a regular printer. And BJ Murphy says that's correct, but given the materials used, larger quantities could be shipped from Earth to wherever via passenger transport, much more sustainable than transporting whole architecture in space. So there's a nice discussion going on in the chat about that. But now let's go to Art Ramon Garcia. I believe you had a question.
Not so much a question, but a comment. I was saying that 1 billion, which is 15% of the world's population, has some form of disability. And I think a lot more outreach can be done towards disabled people because they have caretakers, they have family, and transhumanist technology will heal them and make them lifelong converts. So for a child who's 12 years old and paraplegic, he doesn't care about super longevity or super artificial intelligence. He wants to run, he wants to live. And I think by focusing on the disabled population, which there are numerous groups out there which identify them, and there are mothers who take care of their disabled children, and we can reach out to these people and bring people on board and help them realize that the technology is working to help heal them. And it's not science fiction, that we can work towards funding it and raising awareness towards the transhuman technology. So
yes, indeed. And actually, back in the day when I was holding my physical enlightenment salons at my house, one of my regular guests was John Murrieta, who is a quadriplegic. He got injured in an accident, but he has this advanced wheelchair that enables him to perform a lot of the functions of daily life, not all of them, but he definitely looks forward to the day that he can stand up again using an exoskeleton and function more or less normally. So please take a look in the video archives in my YouTube channel for my enlightenment salons with John Murrieta. Those were some fascinating conversations, but I completely agree. This is an area of extreme relevance where transhumanist technologies can be deployed to alleviate a lot of suffering and disability. Do any of our guests have thoughts on that? Let's see. Aria.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that that's an excellent point, Ramon. Art Ramon. That's an excellent point. In fact, one of the things that drew me to transhumanism originally was myself was because of that disability aspect, that it could help enable more freedoms that don't have to be restricted to the home or whatever. It could kind of transcend that specific condition. Yeah, I just wanted to say, yeah, thank you. And that's a really great point. Especially, it's not just the physical disabilities as well. It's also the neurological disabilities, mental health and that sort of thing. Like in some ways, pharmaceutical medicine can be seen as, in some ways, transhumanist, based on the fact that it does use science, technology, medicine to make those advances. And then so just it's just being able to extend oneself, again, like I keep saying, to be better, to improve oneself and such.
And there are a lot of veterans who have robotic limbs, but they don't identify as a transhuman. They just see it as a robotic prosthetic. So outreach could be done.
Yeah, absolutely.
To disabled people.
Yes, it absolutely could. Thank you for both of your thoughts, Art Ramon and Aria. And now, Pam, did you have some thoughts on this question?
I actually really agree with what Aria said about neurological disabilities as well. There's a good 20% of the population that do have different kinds of neurological issues, and it's something that isn't often enough addressed as a global problem. So I agree with both.
Excellent. So, Charlie, do you want to ask a question or make a comment?
Yeah, no, actually, I wanted to say that this panel has done a really good job with good suggestions. I mean, they've given us answers. I don't have any more questions. They've given some really great ideas about how we can try to spread this, to get more members. I mean, the idea of a questionnaire, getting a questionnaire to, for example, to the STEM community, women in the STEM field, and doing it, and maybe using social media. I mean, combine those three things and you got a really good, powerful way to do things. I think what I heard early on was descriptions of places around the world where transhumanist ideas and technologies are flourishing, and yet the word itself, transhumanism, isn't being connected. So these things are happening, but transhumanism itself isn't a word that's in the minds of people to connect that. And that falls on us. That's more about us, our marketing, we have to define it better. And I'll tell you something interesting that I noticed today. When you, Gennady, were asked to describe the transhumanism, and you gave a brilliant description, obviously one that I agree with, but you did have to say it more than in 2 words. And this is when it comes to marketing, if you want to really push, if you want to get things, it has to be a 2-word. It has to be like what we always know that works, which is 2 words, 3 words. I mean, if you want to describe, for example, if you want to know what a Cubs fan is, I can tell you, he loves the Cubs, loves Cubs. That's 2 words, loves Cubs. What's a white supremacist? Hates blacks. What's a homosexual? You can use 2 words to describe a lot of things, and then you got. So if I say transhumanist, it's not real easy because it's a pretty complex situation. But I did notice today when we had Pam said solve death. Oh, I love that. That's kind of what the platform I'm running on is the idea we want to solve death, right? That was an easy one. Malak said end suffering, 2 words, and that's right. That boom, that got it right on the bat. Aria, when she was mentioning, she said the first thing she thinks of longevity. 1 word, boom. We need to really get our marketing strong. We need to, because people need to know. You can't just say, well, you wear glasses, so you're transhumanist. Well, that's not enough to, that's not compelling, because you know what? So does a Cubs fan, and so does a racist, so does a dentist. They all wear glasses. So we want to be powerful in our definitions. I think the panel did a great job today of really highlighting all this, and boy, it really shows more reason why we need to have more women on board, because I think they do bring a whole different perspective here. And I want to virtually say hello, if they're still on there. Malak, great to meet you. Aria, great to meet you. I think Denisa's already gone. I know Denisa for a long time. Pam, are you there, Pam?
Hi, Charlie. How are you?
I'm doing real well. It's good to see you. Good to talk to you. I think last time we saw each other was probably at RadFest, I assume, right?
Yeah.
Say hi to Rave.
Will do.
Love that guy. He's great. If anybody doesn't know who he is, he's an amazing actor. Go watch his films. But and it's great to see you, and I look forward to. Hopefully there'll be I understand there's going to be another RadFest this year, and I hope to see you there.
Yeah, and good luck with your presidential campaign. It's exciting.
I know. How exciting for me! I can't wait to defeat Trump.
Might not be hard.
Well, we'll see. But anyway, that basically was the commentary I wanted to make. And again, I want to thank the panel. I think you guys, I really appreciate you coming on board, everybody, and talking about all this, because it really did, I think, highlight some important aspects.
Yes, indeed. And thank you for your remarks, Charlie. I agree. This was a great panel, which revealed some great insights for us to pursue. I definitely want to put together a questionnaire and think about how to distribute it to a lot of women, both within and outside the transhumanist community. Now, in terms of characterizing transhumanism with 2 or 3 words, another characterization that my friend Dr. Bill Andrews likes to make is transhumanism is about making life better, or better life would be the 2-word expression of it. And I know he will tune in to watch this salon at some point. And he was a guest at our physical enlightenment salons back in 2017, 2018. And we talked a lot there about transhumanism as making life better. So that's another way, I think, to appeal to greater segments of the public. Now let's see if Pavel has any thoughts or questions for the guests.
Well, yeah, first, thank you, the panelists, for attending. It was a pleasure to listen in all your thoughts. First, I would like to emphasize what Denisa said about escaping survival mode and what Aria said about access to resources. I think to embrace transhumanists, to understand transhumanism, you have to spend some time reading, researching, playing, listening. And unfortunately, most of the population of the world don't have this luxury of the free philosophical search. And the solution, I think we should keep pushing for things like basic income, for affordable educational resources, so people have this time without thinking about what they're going to eat tomorrow, to reflect on their life, on the universe, because it's not easy to even reflect on the fact of your own mortality. You need to spend effort and time to do that. About the woman disparity, yes, I think the woman not represented as well in transhumanism is the legacy and heritage of the exclusive patriarchy of culture. If you look at the history of the culture, history of the philosophy and science, most of the characters there are men. And this is what we're dealing with. This is the heritage we're dealing with. And it's not like women not able to do the science. Like now we see the women can do. Well, they have access to resources. But when they excluded it from, for example, education, so obviously everyone who excluded from educational resources cannot do science. I would like to emphasize what Malak said about that sometimes not only women, but I think any marginalized group cannot express themselves, not because they don't have any ideas, but they have this inner fear or inner limitations which was inserted by the oppressive culture. And our job here is to create this safe space, a kind of space like this, where people can express themselves freely without fear of persecution or fear of mocking or anything else. We all ambassadors of transhumanism, and I think the idea and carrier of this idea is inseparable. So I think I would use the academic term here. It has to be cool to attract people to transhumanism. We have to express empathy and compassion, because in my experience, most of the transhumanists, especially most of the male transhumanists, they have very high rational intelligence, but they don't have that much emotional and social intelligence. So I think by developing this this form of intelligence within us, we can spread the word of transhumanism more efficiently and more wide, and with better results. I think that's all I have for now.
Yes, and those are great thought-provoking remarks, Pavel. Thank you very much. And Cyborian Gaming in the comments states, yes, exactly, Pavel, it's a systemic issue. Mike Lazine states, also people can't be involved on this discussion of technology or transhumanism if they have no access to technology or social media or things like YouTube and so on. Hopefully that kind of access, though, is becoming increasingly widespread. The so-called digital divide that people were talking about in the 1990s isn't so much the case anymore now that even, say, a subsistence farmer in a sub-Saharan African country, for instance, may have a cell phone and may be able to access these kinds of discussions. The question, of course, is that person going to go on our YouTube channel and watch our Virtual Enlightenment Salon, or is that person going to use their cell phone for something very different from being able to access our discussions? So these are definitely all worthwhile ideas to contemplate, and I like how you interrelated so many of the insights of our speakers, Pavel. Now, from our guests, do you have any thoughts in response to what Pavel said? Let's see, Malak.
Yes, I wanted to add something to what Pavel said. There is something. I've seen a lot of guys on Facebook, on social media from Transhumanist Party, and I've seen a lot of Gennady. I've seen also David, Charlie. Nice meeting you. First time I meet you.
Yeah, here.
Yeah,
this is what we do, by the way, when we say hey.
Yeah, I forget about me. That's why I need.
Come on, your space. You're the space person on the panel, for God's sake.
Yeah, I forget it. No.
This is how you don't touch people and catch COVID and live long and prosper all at the same time.
Yeah. So
marketing.
Yeah, but it's the space thing also. It's do you know that it's the space sign from this? Yes, that's the one.
Spock.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Mr. Spock. Yeah. That's...
Yes. Nice meeting you, and good luck. But I wanted to say something. I think there is one point need to be at one point group the women together, because Pam, first time I meet her, also Aria, and I did not see women around. I don't see women active around. So probably also it's nice to include all the women and put them together, so like they communicate and they organize things, and they do things together, because it's very important to know each other and go ahead and be one group together.
Yes, that is absolutely very important, and we hope to have more discussions of this sort. When we were deliberating within the US Transhumanist Party officer circles, how do we proceed after the reorganization? We thought this was one of the necessary first steps to bring together more of our female members and ambassadors and get them talking to one another. As you pointed out, there are some great ideas that can be shared, new directions in which these ideas can be taken for growing the movement. One encouraging thing that has happened since Charlie's endorsement for his presidential campaign was announced was that we have a lot more female members coming in. Now I'm seeing about an equal proportion of new male and female applicants. So something is happening, something is changing, and this is an example of the change. So I appreciate all of that. Now, let's hear David Shoemaker. What thoughts do you have regarding this conversation?
Oh, I have a great many thoughts. This has been wonderful today, and my head and my heart also are really quite full of the comments and discussion that's come across here today. One thing right at the end that I did want to ask, and maybe each of our guests could answer this shortly, but I'm just curious, since we're all very busy people doing all the things that we do, and the people that we would like to attract to our movement are all very busy people doing the things that they do, what was the one thing, the major thing that was the tipping point for you to get involved in transhumanism? And maybe we could start with Malak.
I already spoke about it earlier, and I said, my purpose and your purpose meet together. And I embrace the principles because remember we spoke about purpose yesterday, and it was the main talk in Osinakachi event, and how your purpose comes to you at a certain point in your life, and you defend, and the purpose is the central point of all your aims in your life, and you want to go forward and achieve it. So in my pursuit of my purpose, I came across first Goffredo, Sinakachi, then after that Kennedy, and I read a lot, and I embrace philosophies. And from Cosmism, I found that Cosmism is the sparkle of transhumanism. So I advocate for man evolution into outer space and living there. And my son is advocating for education for kids to go to become multiplanetary species. So we are all crazy people at home, and
I love it. That's amazing.
So yeah, it's like that. So everything, and how we become multiplanetary and go there and live in on Mars. If we go with the same mindset here and we mess up our Earth and we go there, it's not going to work. So we need to have a solution, and the solution is transhumanism.
Wow, thank you for that.
And actually, I'm talking, my son just entered and he said, actually, mommy, it's 2:30 in the morning. Let me finish. Okay, mama.
So,
yeah,
yes, time zones. Time zones are an interesting phenomenon. It's close to 3:30 in the afternoon here. So we're pretty much on opposite ends of the earth, Malak, and yet we're able to have this conversation. That just speaks to the power of these ideas to bring people together. But hopefully at some point we'll be able to hold discussions that are more accessible in time zones for the Middle East or for East Asian countries as well. But for David's question, let's hear from Aria what initially attracted you to transhumanism.
Well, I grew up on Star Trek. so that's yeah, exactly, Charlie. It's been a big factor right there. And then kind of starting on transhumanism. Well, so I grew up on that sort of ideology, that Star Trek, post-capitalist, luxury communist sort of idea, automation sort of idea. So it kind of really started to reach me. It's kind of a long story, but it kind of started to reach me just after I kind of developed my own sense of spirituality. And it connects in that way, in the sense that how do I say this? It connects in the way that like I have this belief in, well, okay, my spirituality comes from science. It's a science-based belief, and it comes from like we are all made of information. You know, we all, when it comes down to it, everything is made of information, like made of math, basically. And I came to this idea that everything and everyone exists as cycles and part of a greater program. And our purpose in our life is to create as much information as possible based on our own parameters of our existence, essentially. And so it's much more involved than that, but because I could go on for hours with this part, but it's essentially so so that we should all be better, sort of thing. We should always whatever circumstance we might be living in, our own limitations, we still try to create data from our own experiences to be able to contribute to the greater consciousness, to the greater universal consciousness. And so it's that, and I was saying like how I describe transhumanism is basically like advanced humanism. It's helping other people to reach their potential. And so it's those experiences that everybody has to, you know, to contribute to this whole idea that it kind of, for me, it's segued into transhumanist ideology, that we can all contribute to this greater program, whatever it is. Who knows what it actually is, if it actually exists or not, really. And so from there, like it kind of looks towards the future of like what would happen if we do end up destroying our planet. How are we going to survive? We need to get off this planet eventually to be able to survive. And so it's like, but then how do we get there, sort of thing. And it's I believe that transhumanist solutions can help us reach those goals, help us to solve those problems. And that's kind of where I kind of just delved into that whole rabbit hole of transhumanism and such. So I could obviously go into a lot more, but I'm just going to leave it right there. That's how I got into it. Star Trek, basically just Star Trek.
Cool.
Yes, and you mentioned transhumanism as being advanced humanism. Actually, I have a short essay that I turned into a segment of an online course that I am collaborating on with TAFFDS for the Tikidia Institute in Nigeria. And that unit in my lesson is called Transhumanism as the Logical Extrapolation of Humanism. And it's interesting to think, well, why would we be teaching business students about transhumanism and humanism? But I really think people who are interested in how business is going to develop in the future, they need to have an awareness of emerging technologies, how those are going to change the business landscape and the landscape of everyday life, and the thought currents that are very much foundational to that. And those are transhumanism, but transhumanism has humanism at its foundation, essentially. So very perceptive thoughts there, Aria. And now, Pam, how did you get involved with transhumanism?
It all started when I read the book Fantastic Voyage by Ray Kurzweil, Charlie's friend, and Dr. Terry Grossman.
Great guy.
That started my thinking about the whole concept, and I became very hungry for knowledge. As you can see, I read. I started reading a lot more books on this topics, more books by Ray. Terry's actually become a really good friend of mine, and of course, I've been to RadFest now and was exposed to people like Natasha Beatamore. So it's been a wonderful journey learning about transhumanism and meeting this great group of people, because the community that we have is really strong, and there's some really passionate people in this community that we can learn a lot from.
Yes, indeed. Excellent. And Ray Kurzweil was an introduction to transhumanism for many people. His 2005 book, The Singularity is Near, definitely was a strong influence on me. I read it in 2007, so I had been aware of transhumanism prior to that time because of my familiarity with Aubrey de Grey and the SENS Foundation, and also the essays of Max Moore. But Ray Kurzweil opened my mind to some fascinating possibilities within our lifetime with advances in artificial intelligence, computational capability. And then I kind of went backward with reading his books. So I read The Age of Spiritual Machines, The Age of Intelligent Machines, and those were quite fascinating as well in terms of what he got right about the early 2000s. But thank you to everyone for sharing with us how you came into this movement. I think that's important as well in terms of broadening our reach, drawing new people and finding out what it is that attracts people and gets them to explore further. Let's see if John Carrots is available and if he wants to make any statement or ask any question.
Yeah, I can talk just real quick here. I was going to say it was a great dialogue today, and we should do this again. Want to remind, I hear talk about STEAM, but I always say we got to remember about, STEM, but I always want to push the STEAM, which includes the arts. I think that's very important. And I was thinking about two words, maybe forever healthy, and maybe if you think about one word, maybe just forever. So that was my comments for the day. But I think this definitely was a good dialogue, and we should do exactly the same group again a later day and discuss some other issues.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. And I like both forever healthy and forever. Actually, in my living room, I took two of kind of these conventional inspirational plaques that you could purchase. One of them says forever, and the other one says live. I actually made the live plaque myself as a kind of makeshift craft project, and I put them side by side on the wall in my living room.
Kennedy?
Yes.
Yes. Can we ask the ladies what they would say in 2 words?
In 2 words, okay. Go ahead.
Bam.
Wow, how to say it in 2 words?
Yeah.
I have to think about that, Malak.
And you, Aria, but you said it before, Pam.
Yeah, I've said it before. It's basically just, I think I would just say advanced humanism, because it pretty much encompasses the whole ideological concept. That's how I see it anyway.
That nails it.
Mm-hmm. So, Malak, how would you characterize it in 2 words?
I haven't thought about it, but I would say one. I just wanted to get the lady say it. I would say life. Real life. Life.
Well, yes, transhumanism is about the pursuit of life, maximizing that, extending that.
No, that's too long, Jenny. Too long.
What about maximizing life? Maybe? I don't know.
Maximizing life, that's 2 words.
Star Trek.
To be.
I like your Star Trek suggestion.
So all of these are actually potential marketing slogans. If one could think of some sort of catchy graphic that the 2-word slogan could be placed on with an interesting futuristic background and perhaps some references for people to look at further, references to the Transhumanist Party, to our website, to our membership link. So you've given us some great ideas there. And hopefully we can keep the ideas coming. But now I think our time is coming to an end, and I'd like each of our three remaining guests to make a closing statement. What did you think of this discussion? How would you characterize it? Are there any additional insights that you'd like to share? So let's begin with Pam.
Well, I want to thank you for including me in the panel discussion today. I really enjoyed it. And just want to offer up, if you need help following up on some of the ideas we talked about, helping to sculpt survey questions, or who do we send the survey to, feel free to tap into me. And I'm happy to help and contribute whatever I can. I believe this is a really important cause. So whatever we can do to help, just feel free to ask.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Pam. I appreciate that. And I think we will be reaching out to you with regard to the questionnaire. I think we'll be reaching out to a lot of people to help spread the questionnaire through a variety of social networks, personal networks, so that we could get the broadest participation we can. And I really appreciate that. So now let's go to Aria. Aria, what closing thoughts do you have?
Similarly, I just thank you for inviting me to this. It's literally my first time ever doing something like this. So I want to thank you for your patience and understanding with my trip ups. Major anxiety on this end. I would love to be able to participate in something like this again, especially being able to contribute my perspective, perhaps that maybe isn't often considered. Not mine personally, but I mean from the perspective of well, honestly, queer trans people, as well as marginalized and such, which I don't think is often specifically addressed as often as it should be, I feel. As I was saying earlier, it has this whole narrative of being largely inaccessible to most people, and I feel that maybe I do have something to contribute in that regard, to maybe help move push the movement along. And yeah, I just want to say it's great to meet you, Charlie, and Pam and Malak and Denisa when she was on, and as well also all the other members that have joined us, David and Art, Ramon and Pavel, yeah, and it's been a great discussion. I really enjoyed it. It's gone a lot better than I thought it would go on my end. I would really look forward to being able to participate in the future in something like this.
Well, wonderful, Aria. We definitely appreciated having you here and offering your thoughts. And as an ambassador, you're going to have access to future virtual enlightenment salons as well. I hope you'll be able to join us. So thank you very much. And now we go to Malak. What are your closing thoughts?
Thank you so much for having me. And ladies, nice meeting you. And Denisa also. And I'm excited to meet you again and to talk again and see what we can do together. Thank you also, Gennady, and thank you, Tom Ross, because he's the one who reached first to request that I assist today. And Aria, I wanted to tell you something. It's your first time you do this. You are doing amazing, because actually you should see me the first time I've done it and how it was a disaster, because actually English is not my first language. French and Arabic they are. And it was difficult for me because I write very well, but speaking like this, that's why I speak very fast sometimes. So it's like that it comes out very quick and I don't have to, but you are doing very, very well. And thank you, nice meeting you again. Thank you, David. Thank you, Pavel, Charlie, Art, and everyone else is watching, and whoever is gonna watch later on YouTube. And I'm here to help. And Gennady, you know where you find me. I'm around LinkedIn, Facebook, or whatever. Just drop a message or so, and I will be there too. But I have an idea for this marketing slogan that in 2 words: make a contest.
Yes, that is a great idea.
Make a contest with the, you know how it goes with the a little design or whatever, and you will have a lot of traffic coming to your Facebook or wherever you are active, and it's going to bring other people. So make context with something, some prize or whatever. So it's a good idea like that. You can have you can have insights, and people that are coming even if they're not they were not from the party already.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. It will generate ideas, generate conversation and interest, and we can use multiple contributions. We don't just have to use the winning contribution because with marketing, you can send different messages at different times to different groups of people, as long as they're all on one consistent theme. You can have variations on that theme depending on what you think will work in a particular context. So yes, we can have a lot of ideas generated that way. So thank you to all of our guests, to Malak, Trabelsi, Loeb, to Pam Keefe, to Aria Cheng, to Denisa Rensen, and to our US Transhumanist Party officers who participated in this conversation: David, Pavel, John, Charlie, Art Ramon, and Daniel Yelishvili. We all appreciate your insights. Thank you to our participants from the chat. I think this was a necessary conversation. It was also a conversation that takes us in very promising new directions, especially after the US Transhumanist Party reorganization. This is exactly what we need in order to broaden the appeal of the USTP and the transhumanist movement more generally. I think we've made strides even by having these discussions as we've engaged in today. But let's continue the conversations on various media and hopefully in future virtual enlightenment salons as well. Thank you everyone for coming today, and I hope you have an excellent remainder of the weekend.